America is a country built on contradictions. It speaks of justice, yet too often forgets who's still waiting for it. Janelle Carter stood on the steps of the Madison and Birch flagship store in downtown Atlanta, her worn heels clicking against the polished marble. The sprawling luxury department store towered above her like a glass cathedral. It wasn't just a store, it was a symbol. Madison and Birch was a legacy brand with a reputation for exclusivity, refinement, and status. For years, Janelle had walked past its towering entrance, wondering what it looked like on the inside. Now, she was about to walk in as a consultant. It still didn't feel real. A few months earlier, Janelle had been sitting in her one-bedroom apartment in West End, struggling to make ends meet. Her degree in business strategy from Spelman College hadn't come with a guarantee of opportunity. She'd spent the last 3 years bouncing from freelance gigs to part-time jobs, sometimes consulting small boutiques, other times helping nonprofits organize their finances. Despite her sharp mind and dedication, doors rarely opened for her the way they did for others. Sometimes, the way store managers looked at her, a tall black woman with natural coils and skin kissed by the sun, told her everything she needed to know before she even spoke. They saw her and assumed limits, disinterest, or worse, threat. So when she submitted her resume to Madison and Birch, she hadn't expected a callback. But the callback had come swiftly, followed by an interview with the CEO himself. His name was Matthew Langston, a man born into wealth and luxury, known for transforming failing businesses into gold mines. He was a fixture in Forbes, and social media always caught him in crisp Armani suits, gracing charity galas, sometimes standing beside Hollywood stars and Silicon Valley giants. Janelle had assumed the worst, that she'd be paraded for diversity, or grilled, or politely declined once she walked through the door. But Matthew Langston had looked her straight in the eye during their first meeting and said, "I care about results. And I read your work on adaptive merchandising for mid-sized retailers. It was brilliant. You've got the job." It had knocked the breath from her lungs. Now, standing in the gleaming lobby where chandeliers shimmered and the scent of expensive perfume floated through the air, Janelle felt two worlds colliding. She smoothed the lapels of her blazer and walked up to the concierge desk. "Ms. Carter," a woman with an earpiece asked. "Mr. Langston is expecting you." As she was led upstairs, Janelle passed polished floors, manicured displays, and sales associates who eyed her with a cocktail of curiosity and confusion. Some of them gave her tight smiles. Others didn't bother to hide their skepticism. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks on a sentence that hadn't yet been written. On the executive floor, Matthew was waiting in a minimalist office lined with books and blueprints. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him looked out over the city skyline. "Janelle," he said with a warm nod. "Welcome." He gestured for her to sit and launched immediately into his vision, a series of bold changes he wanted to make in how Madison and Birch marketed its fall collection. He'd read her analyses. He wanted her to lead an initiative to increase accessibility for younger and more diverse buyers without cheapening the brand. It was daring. It was risky. And she was all in. Over the next few weeks, Janelle threw herself into the work. Every morning, she arrived before most of the staff, carrying her coffee and her neatly organized notes. She met with merchandisers, reviewed pricing strategies, helped overhaul digital displays, and recommended subtle shifts in product placement that resulted in a noticeable uptick in customer engagement. Most of the senior staff watched from a distance. Some whispered. Some dismissed her as a passing experiment. But Matthew remained steady. He backed her ideas, challenged her with thoughtful questions, and included her in meetings where no one else in her position had been allowed before. He respected her, not for her race or her background or to check a box, but for her mind. But it wasn't all respect and roses. There was one consultant who never hid her disdain. Alexis Dreyer. Tall, sleek, always dressed in shades of icy blue or corporate gray. Alexis had been with Madison and Birch for almost 5 years. Her father sat on the board of a logistics firm that partnered with Langston's distribution arm. She had connections, charm, and ambition that bordered on hunger. Alexis had made it clear in quiet, backhanded remarks that she didn't understand why Janelle was in the room. And Janelle, to her credit, had kept her chin high and mouth closed. Until the day she overheard something in the corridor outside the executive conference room. Alexis had her phone pressed to her ear, voice low but fierce. "He trusts her. Can you believe that? Langston actually thinks she's some kind of genius. I'm telling you, if we time it right, we can pin this price leak on her, or better yet, on him. He won't know what hit him." Janelle had frozen mid-step, tucked behind a wall. Her heart raced. A plot. Someone, likely Alexis and whoever was on the other end of that line, was planning to frame Matthew Langston. For what, she didn't know. But her stomach dropped with dread. And she knew one thing, she couldn't ignore it. The corridor felt suddenly colder, tighter, like the air itself had turned against her. Janelle stood frozen behind a glass partition, her heart hammering against her ribs. We can pin this price leak on her, or better yet, on him. Alexis's voice lingered in her ears like the aftermath of a siren. Cold. Calculating. She waited until the footsteps retreated and the door to the elevator closed with a chime. Then she exhaled a slow, trembling breath. There was no mistaking what she'd heard. A plot to frame Matthew Langston, the CEO who had given her a chance when no one else had. Who had looked past her skin color, her background, and hired her based on her ability. Who had backed her in meetings when others had smirked or rolled their eyes. She leaned against the wall for a moment, processing. Was this corporate sabotage? Fraud? Was Alexis acting alone, or was someone helping her from the inside? Who was on the other end of that call? By the time Janelle made it back to her office, a clean, narrow space with glass walls, her head was spinning. She pulled up the last week of communications from the merchandising team. Something didn't feel right. There had been whispers of pricing errors in the Midwest division. Discounts offered to high-end clients before the public sales began. A memo had gone out from the legal team warning of a possible internal breach of confidential information. That could be it. The leak Alexis had mentioned. She sat down hard in her chair and stared at her screen, her reflection staring back. This was dangerous. In a company like Madison and Birch, reputation was currency. A scandal could bury careers. It could tarnish a brand's image. It could be twisted by the media to reinforce every ugly stereotype about who gets ahead and who gets blamed. And she was the easiest scapegoat. A black woman, still new, still unproven in the eyes of many, still being watched like she was an intern. If this got out of hand, she wouldn't just lose her job. She'd be labeled. Janelle sat motionless for a long time, her fingers steepled under her chin. Then she stood and walked out. She found Matthew alone in his office, scrolling through data on a large touchscreen. He looked up and smiled. Janelle, just the person I wanted to see. She shut the door gently behind her. Do you have a minute? She asked, her voice low. Matthew's smile faded as he caught the edge in her tone. Of course. What's wrong? She hesitated. Her heart was slamming again. But she made her voice steady. I overheard Alexis on a phone call, she began. She said something about setting you up. About a price leak. And pinning it on you. Or me. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then Matthew stood slowly, his brows drawing together. You're sure? Janelle nodded. Positive. He exhaled sharply, then moved to his desk and tapped his intercom. Lily, can you hold my next call for a few minutes? He gestured for Janelle to sit, then closed the blinds with a flick of a button. What else do you know? He asked. I think it has to do with the Midwest division, Janelle said, pulling up the flagged price errors on her tablet. A few high-end items were listed below threshold. It looks intentional, not accidental. Someone's trying to show internal failure and they're setting up someone to take the fall. Matthew studied the data in silence, then looked up at her. You realize what this means, don't you? She did. Loud and clear. If this became official, if they confronted Alexis or went to legal, everything would spiral. Investigations. Lawyers. Rumors. And Janelle, the new face in the room, would be painted as either a whistleblower or worse, part of the mess. Her voice was quiet. I couldn't stay quiet. Even if it blows back on me. Something changed in Matthew's expression then, not surprise, not pity, but respect. Deeper than what he'd shown before. You just did something most people here wouldn't have had the spine to do, he said. And she could feel the weight of that truth. Over the next 2 days, things shifted quietly beneath the surface. Matthew assigned his personal cybersecurity team to monitor internal data flow. Logs were traced. Old emails re-examined. Access reports combed over. Janelle kept her head down, but the knot in her stomach never loosened. At meetings, Alexis smiled her usual flawless smile. In the elevator, she complimented Janelle on her presentation style as if the knife wasn't already drawn behind her back. Janelle played along calm, collected. But she was watching. She noticed when Alexis lingered near IT after hours. When she logged into restricted software systems even though she had no reason to. When she deleted messages from her internal account. And then came the breaking point. At 7:13 p.m. on a Wednesday, Matthew called Janelle to his office. She tried to frame you, he said, his jaw tight. Forwarded fabricated documents from your username to external vendors. It didn't work, the timestamp records don't lie. But it was enough that if you hadn't spoken up, this could have ruined you. Janelle felt her throat tighten. Alexis had tried to destroy her with precision and polish. And Matthew had believed her. Investigated. Protected her. You don't have to confront her, he said. My legal team will take it from here. Janelle shook her head. No. I want her to know I saw through her. He gave her a long look, then nodded. Okay. But you won't go in alone. The next day, Janelle entered the boardroom with Matthew at her side. Alexis was already there, sitting with her usual grace, sipping iced coffee like nothing had shifted in the earth beneath her feet. But when she saw Janelle, her smile flickered. "Ms. Dreyer," Matthew began, his voice calm, clipped, "we've completed an internal audit of the recent pricing errors. And we have undeniable proof that you accessed secure files and attempted to reassign blame to Janelle Carter." Alexis paled. "What are you talking about? That's absurd." Janelle stepped forward. "I heard you, Alexis. Outside the executive lounge. You said you'd pin it on him or me. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I hope maybe I misheard. But you kept digging, kept covering your tracks. And you were sloppy." Alexis stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "This is a setup," she snapped. "You're trying to ruin me because I've been here longer." But Matthew didn't budge. "My legal team is prepared to take formal action. You're suspended until further notice. Security will escort you out." Alexis looked between them, the white millionaire she tried to betray and the black woman she tried to erase. Then she grabbed her bag, lips trembling with fury, and stormed out. Afterward, Janelle stood on the executive floor terrace, overlooking the city. The sun was setting in amber streaks. Matthew joined her, silent for a moment. "Thank you," he said finally. "You didn't just protect me. You protected the company. You protected yourself. And you did it with dignity." Janelle turned to him. "You gave me a chance. I wasn't about to let someone take it away from either of us." They shook hands, but something deeper passed between them, mutual recognition. Not of status or power, but of character. And for the first time in a long while, Janelle felt like she belonged. It didn't take long. By the following Monday, the news had begun to seep through the building like a slow leak behind a wall, faint at first, then impossible to ignore. Alexis Dreyer was gone. Suspended pending legal review. Rumors swirled through the executive floors, whispered between lattes and conference calls, spilled in hushed fragments over networking lunches. No one said Janelle's name out loud. But they didn't have to. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she walked into a room. In the glances passed over the rims of espresso cups. In the way some colleagues who'd once nodded politely in hallways now seemed too preoccupied to meet her gaze. Janelle had learned a long time ago that doing the right thing didn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it felt like isolation. She sat alone in the break room one afternoon, eating a chicken Caesar wrap from the deli across the street, and listened to two junior consultants, both of them white, both of them quiet but not quiet enough, as they spoke behind her in half-whispers. "I mean, it's kind of intense, right? First she shows up out of nowhere, and now Alexis is out the door? I heard she played it political. She's smart, though. Langston likes her. Probably good PR for the company, too." That last part stung. It wasn't the first time she'd been reduced to optics. It would have been easier to ignore them, to stay silent and keep eating, but she turned around slowly, meeting their eyes with the full force of her calm. "Langston doesn't keep people around for PR," she said evenly. "He keeps people who deliver results." The younger of the two flushed red. The other mumbled an apology and grabbed his coffee a little too quickly. She didn't smile. She wasn't in the mood for appeasement. Later that week, she stood in a room with 10 other senior consultants, all men, all white, presenting a 6-month growth strategy for luxury millennial buyers. Her ideas were bold: limited edition social capsule campaigns, augmented reality try-on stations for shoes and handbags, and a marketing pivot that targeted mid-tier buyers with long-term loyalty programs. Some of them sat with folded arms, skeptical. One or two asked sharp, pointed questions that reeked more of challenge than curiosity. Janelle fielded them with poise. She was used to this. She'd had to work twice as hard for half the benefit every step of her career. And now, the suspicion that trailed behind her like a scent wasn't just about her skin, her gender, or her success. It was about power. She had proven she wasn't just another hire, she had teeth. She had influence. And that made her dangerous to people who were used to being unchallenged. After the meeting, one of the men, Paul Winston, older, gray temples, a polished smile, pulled her aside. "You know, Janelle," he said in a voice as smooth as scotch, "you might want to slow it down a bit. People are still on edge from the whole Alexis situation." She blinked. "You mean the situation where she tried to sabotage the company and frame me for it?" Paul offered a neutral shrug, the kind that reeked of diplomatic noncommittal. "Just saying perception matters." Janelle gave him a thin, sharp smile. "So does truth." But it wasn't all suspicion and resistance. One day, as she was leaving the office, an assistant named Maria, a young Latina from the Bronx, caught her in the elevator. "Hey," she said softly. "I just wanted to say what you did. That took guts. Some of us noticed." Janelle blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you." Maria nodded. "You're not invisible. Just know that." It hit Janelle harder than she expected, those quiet words, that acknowledgement. She had spent so long pretending she didn't need recognition. That all she needed was her work, her integrity. But hearing someone say they saw her. It made her chest tighten in the best possible way. As the company stabilized, Matthew began including Janelle in more high-level meetings. Not as a gesture, as a peer. One day, after a strategy session on international expansion, he asked her to stay behind. "I want to ask you something," he said, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Would you ever consider stepping into a permanent executive role here?" She stared at him. "I'm not talking about consulting anymore. I mean chief strategy officer. You've earned the title." Her mind raced. That kind of position would be life-changing. Influence, salary, vision, she could change the direction of Madison and Birch from the inside. And for a black woman, especially one from a working-class background, ascending to the C-suite in a company like this was practically unheard of. But there was fear too. The higher she climbed, the more visible she became and the more alone. "I'd have to think about it," she said finally. "It's not just about the job. It's about what I'd be walking into." Matthew nodded as if he understood more than she expected. "You wouldn't be walking in alone," he said. But she knew that wasn't entirely true. That night, Janelle drove home with the windows down, the Atlanta breeze running fingers through her hair. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, her mother. She picked it up on speaker. "Hey, Mama. I saw your face in that business magazine at the checkout line," her mother said, pride spilling through the phone like sunlight. "Your daddy would have been so proud." Janelle smiled, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thanks, Mama. You doing okay?" her mother asked, sensing something behind the silence. Janelle hesitated, then replied, "I'm doing what's right. That's never easy." "No," her mother agreed, voice warm, "but you're built for it." And somehow those words steadied her more than anything else had. The invitation came in a black velvet envelope hand-delivered to her apartment. The 47th Annual Madison and Birch Leadership Gala. Guest of honor, Janelle Carter. She stared at the card for a long time before setting it down. That wasn't what shook her the most. It was the line that followed. "In recognition of her exceptional contributions to integrity, innovation, and diversity in leadership." The next morning, Janelle stood in front of her mirror, the invitation on the bathroom sink, brushing her coils into a bun so tight it felt like a helmet. Diversity in leadership. She had never wanted to be a symbol. She wanted to be a strategist, a builder, a professional whose merit spoke louder than her background. But after the fallout with Alexis, she became something else in the eyes of the public. A black woman who stood up against corruption. An executive who broke the mold. An anomaly in a room full of legacy hires and Ivy League pedigrees. A week before the gala, an article appeared in Forbes Online. The headline read, "From Harlem to the boardroom, Janelle Carter's quiet revolution at Madison and Birch." There was her face captured mid-laugh during a client retreat. And below that, a story that mixed admiration with heavy-handed phrases like overcoming adversity and defying the odds. They mentioned her degrees, her sharp rise, her role in protecting CEO Matthew Langston's reputation. They even quoted an anonymous executive who said, "She's not what you expect when you think of power at Madison and Birch." That's a good thing. Janelle closed her laptop. She wanted to scream. That evening, she met with Matthew at a quiet rooftop bar in Buckhead. He called it a check-in, but she could tell it was more than that. He handed her a whiskey, then leaned against the glass railing. "I saw the piece in Forbes," he said. "Yeah," Janelle muttered. "Not exactly how I wanted to be introduced to the country." Matthew gave a wry smile. "You know, I've been on the cover of Fortune 5 times. Every time they use words like visionary, self-made, innovator. They never mention that my father gave me $2 million in startup capital." Janelle raised an eyebrow. "They like a neat narrative." "They do," he said. "And yours is one they haven't heard before. That makes them both fascinated and uncomfortable." She looked at him. "You still want me to be your chief strategy officer?" "More than ever." She sipped the whiskey. "You understand what that would mean? Publicly? For me. For this company." "I do," he said. "But do you?" 2 days before the gala, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Janelle Carter?" the voice asked. "This is Nia Rollins with CNN Business. We're doing a special segment on corporate leadership and race. You've become something of a name lately. Would you be open to a brief interview?" Janelle felt the heat rise behind her eyes. "I didn't ask to be a name," she said softly. Nia was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly why people need to hear you." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. At the gala, the lights were soft and golden. Everything glittered, the chandeliers, the champagne, the polished shoes of men who'd been born into boardrooms. Matthew introduced her with a speech that was short, elegant, and careful. "She changed this company," he said. "Not just by being here, but by demanding that the space she was in lived up to the values we claim to have." The applause was warm. Real. Janelle stepped onto the stage in a slate gray gown, the fabric hugging her body like armor. She looked out at the sea of faces. Most of them were white. Most of them male. All of them watching. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment on 136th and Lenox, she began. And when I was young, I didn't think boardrooms like this were meant for people who looked like me. She paused, took a breath. But I've learned something since then. Integrity doesn't have a face. Talent doesn't have a zip code. And courage? It's not about being fearless, it's about showing up anyway. The room was silent. She continued. Some people called me a whistleblower. Some called me a token. But I'm neither. I'm a strategist. I'm a leader. And I'm standing here not because I'm exceptional, but because I was given a chance. And I made the most of it. A beat passed. I hope you start giving more people that chance. Because if you do, this company and this country will be better for it. After the applause, Matthew came over and hugged her quick and firm. You know what you just did, right? He asked. Yeah, she said. I said the thing that needed to be said. The next morning, she accepted the role of Chief Strategy Officer. Her nameplate was installed the same afternoon. She stood and looked at it for a long while before touching it gently like it might vanish. Power changes the room. Sometimes subtly, like a scent. Other times like a thunderclap. After Janelle Carter officially stepped into the role of Chief Strategy Officer at Madison and Birch, the air around her thickened with tension she could taste. The handshakes were still polite. The meetings still productive. The emails still began with "Hope you're well." But underneath the decorum? A hum of resistance. It started with the quarterly town hall. For the first time in the company's history, a black woman stood beside the CEO in front of 800 employees and outlined the company's 3-year strategy, not just in numbers but in vision. Restructuring international retail with an equity-first supply chain model. Expanding mentorship and leadership pipelines for underrepresented employees. Transitioning luxury lines to sustainable sourcing, a move that would cost millions up front but redefine the brand. The response? A wave of corporate applause. And a ripple of unease. In the following weeks, Janelle noticed the small signs. A few department heads didn't implement her directives until prompted twice. Reports came in with errors that just happened to omit key DEI metrics. She was left off a calendar invite for a closed-door strategy session, accidentally, of course. She knew what it was. She'd seen it before. Passive sabotage. The kind designed to frustrate, exhaust, and isolate just enough to make someone question if they really belonged. Then came the media backlash. The Forbes article had sparked a wave of interest. Not all of it kind. An op-ed in the Wall Street Times appeared under the headline. When diversity becomes disruption, the quiet backlash against corporate tokenism. It didn't mention her by name. It didn't have to. It referenced unnamed diversity hires making ideological decisions. Questioned the strategic value of equity pipelines. Warned of the cost of woke capitalism. A week later, a YouTube channel with over 2 million subscribers ran a video titled, Langston's Left Turn, Is Madison and Birch Selling Out? Clips of Janelle's gala speech were played over dramatic music. The comment section was a war zone. Who even shops there anymore? Typical corporate pandering. She's just playing the race card. She read exactly 5 comments before she closed the page. But the damage was done. Matthew called her into his office the next day. I'm not backing off this, he said firmly. The board is nervous. Shareholders are calling. But we knew this would happen. Janelle stood at the window watching cars blur by 34 floors below. It's not the pushback that bothers me, she said. It's the silence. The people inside this company who agree with the vision but won't say a word. Matthew nodded. They're scared. The echo chamber outside is loud. But you're not alone. She turned to face him. I need you to say that when it matters. Not just to me. To them. She started making changes anyway. She launched an internal task force, Elevate, to accelerate internal promotions for women and BIPOC employees. She approved a new mentorship program targeting historically black colleges and universities, including Spelman and Morehouse. She personally mentored a group of mid-level staffers, among them Malik George, a data analyst from Philly with too much brilliance and not enough access. She reminded him and others like him that they had a voice, that they mattered. But not everyone welcomed the shift. One evening, after a long meeting, Janelle entered the stairwell and froze. Voices echoed above her. It's not about race. It's about priorities. She's bleeding the budget dry with all these initiatives. She's got Langston under her thumb. Anyone else would have been checked by now. Can't say that, though. She's untouchable. One wrong word and HR will eat you alive. Janelle stood still. Her stomach clenched. She waited until the voices drifted off, then walked down the stairs in silence, each step heavier than the last. That night, she sat in her living room, phone in hand, staring at a text from her mother. Mom, you're doing more than we dreamed of, baby. Just don't let it steal your light. She replied. It already has some of it, Mama. but I'm holding on to the rest. She opened a notebook and wrote 5 words. No one will rewrite this. A week later, she held a press briefing herself. No PR handlers. No ghostwriters. No spinning. I'm not interested in being anyone's symbol, she said to the packed room of journalists. But I am committed to making sure this company reflects the world we live in, not just in who it markets to, but who it empowers from within. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She ended the statement with a quote from civil rights icon Ella Baker. Strong people don't need strong leaders. Then she walked out. Internally, things began to shift. Quietly. Unevenly. But they shifted. Maria from the executive floor got promoted to department coordinator. Malik George joined a project pitch that landed a national campaign. Janelle's vision was still facing headwinds, but it was no longer alone. People were watching, listening, and some, just some, were beginning to believe. The fire alarm rang at 3:14 a.m. Janelle was asleep when her phone buzzed nonstop on the nightstand. Emergency texts, calls, pinged messages from 6 different execs and 2 board members. Crisis at Madison and Birch HQ. She pulled on jeans and a hoodie, threw on a blazer without thinking, and drove through early dawn mist to the building she'd helped rebuild, not with steel, but with sweat and truth. When she got there, the smoke was gone. But the damage remained. Someone had thrown a rock through the front glass wall, the one with the etched mission statement she'd helped rewrite months earlier. We lead with courage, build with integrity, and lift as we rise. The rock had shattered the bottom half of the word integrity. Spray painted across the company's polished stone steps were 3 words. Go woke, go broke. The police were already there. So was Matthew Langston. They didn't speak at first. Just stared at the mess, the broken glass like ice on concrete. Finally, Matthew said, they'll call it vandalism. I call it fear. Janelle nodded slowly. We rattled the wrong cages. He turned to her. You okay? I'm tired, she said. But I'm not backing down. The incident made national news. CNN ran a segment. NBC covered it in a special on corporate extremism. Even the New York Times ran a front-page piece. Diversity in the crosshairs, the high cost of changing corporate culture. But for Janelle, the question wasn't what had happened. The question was, what now? 3 days later, she walked into the auditorium at HQ to address the staff. Over 400 people were packed in standing room only. Others joined via livestream. No script. No PR coaching. Just her voice. I won't pretend this wasn't personal, she said. She paused. Let the room breathe with her. But I want you to understand something. That rock didn't just break glass. It tested who we are. She looked out at the room, saw young interns, seasoned execs, warehouse managers, engineers. People from every corner of the company. When we talk about equity and progress, it's not a threat to anyone, it's an invitation to all of us. To be better. To lead better. She nodded toward the steps outside where the graffiti had already been removed. They wanted us to back down. We're not going to. We're going to build something so unshakable that no act of hate can tear it down. Applause started slow, then rose to something that echoed. Janelle didn't smile. Not yet. A week later, something changed. Employees began pinning handwritten notes on the wall of the main lobby, right over the shattered glass, which they decided to leave visible for now. Some of the notes read, Integrity is still here. Not just a slogan. A movement. Thanks for leading with your spine. Even Paul Winston, the old-school exec who once warned her to slow down, sent a message to the board in support of her vision. It was short. It simply said, She's doing what we should have done 10 years ago. Months passed. The company didn't go broke. It grew. Janelle's strategy landed 3 major brand expansions into cities with historically underserved markets, Detroit, New Orleans, and Oakland. Revenue climbed. So did employee satisfaction. More women, more Black and brown professionals, and more LGBTQ+ hires moved into leadership than at any time in the company's history. She didn't fix everything, but she changed the course. One day, she sat in her office, not the corner one, but the open-glass suite she'd designed herself, and looked at a photo on her desk. Her father. A Harlem mechanic with grease-stained hands and a laugh like thunder. He never made it past high school, but he believed his daughter would change the world. You were right, Daddy, she whispered. And I'm not done yet. A reporter once asked her in a panel, Do you think your legacy is set now? She had smiled then, a slow and tired smile, but one still lit with fire. Legacy isn't what they write about you, she'd said. It's what lives on in people who never met you but were changed by what you stood for. Epilogue, a year later. At a new Madison and Birch store opening in Newark, New Jersey, a teenage girl stood in line with her mother. She gazed up at a framed photo of Janelle Carter near the entrance. The quote below it read, We rise by lifting. We lead by listening. We stay by earning it every day. The girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. She looks like me, she whispered. Her mother smiled. She looks like all of us.